Hey, welcome. Of course, somebody calls me as I sit there trying to bring us into the show. Welcome to BuckeyeGrove.com BIA Recruiting Chat Live. I'm your host, Kevin Noon, joined as always by Joseph Hastings. And as you know, we're just a couple days away from the start of June, and the Wild West is going to be open for business at that point. We had the opportunity last week to do an audio podcast, but we wanted to it was starting to get a little long, so we said let's do a video one, let's do a live one, and see what's happening, what people want to ask. We got a lot of questions in the queue, not a lot of viewers at this moment, but hopefully over the course of the hour they join us. But Joseph, welcome to the show.
Kevin, thank you so much for setting this up. We're going to have some nice little special banners here that Kevin had and some great recruiting topics. And yeah, this is just the perfect time to do this show here with such a big June right around the corner, not only for official visits, but also unofficial visits, camps, things of that nature. So very excited about what's coming up here in the next few weeks.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just so much happening. It all starts June 1st in theory, but June 2nd is the first camp date. Going to be a lot of guys who will be coming in looking to earn that offer because honestly, when you look at the situations, I mean, it's a case of where when we're talking about 23s and beyond, staff doesn't know what these guys look like, really. I mean, it's been, a year and a half since they've had the opportunity to see them, a couple of full football seasons. I mean, sure, you get an opportunity to see some stuff on tape, but, for a staff that has been so adamant about wanting to work guys out on campus before extending offers, and then the world changes, and now you have to just sometimes extend that offer to have a chair at the table.
Yeah, this is pretty frustrating for the staff. Obviously, what's been happening over the past year or so, and it's definitely out of their control, out of every single college's control. But the spring evaluation period is huge. Missing out on that, not being able to go to schools, evaluate these kids in person, extend offers, be able to do that grind, go throughout the country, scout out those, maybe those under the radar prospects, those 3-star prospects that don't have many offers, but you see the talent in them, you see a fit for them in your system. That's all been lost due to the pandemic and the ensuing dead period that's been in effect since March 2020. But now you're going to be able to have them on campus. And not only are you going to have those 6 camp dates, but we've reported on multiple recruits who are going to be doing private workouts with the staff, even some in the 2022 class, such as Kevin Thomas, wide receiver out of the Pennsylvania area. So you're going to have these opportunities to do camps and private workouts. This is something that they haven't been able to do in well over a year, and you're going to see those offers extended to kids who may not have gotten it if the dead period was still in effect. So on top of being happy for the staff that they're getting this chance, I'm also happy for the recruits themselves that they're going to be able to showcase their skill sets in front of one of the best college programs in the nation.
Exactly. I mean, so there's going to be a lot going on with all of that. I mean, another name is somebody who I know that's coming in for a workout is a 23 tight end, Tanner Lemaster out of Washington Courthouse. I've had the opportunity to meet one of his trainers. Very big fan of Tanner. You got 22s who are going to be looking to get that offer. I mean, we all think we know what the 22 board is going to look like. And in a lot of ways, we do have a pretty good idea of what the first wave looks like, but over and beyond all of that, we've always talked about camp offers, and now that we're having camps, we're going to have camp offers again.
Yeah, that's absolutely a good point. And we've reported on a few recruits this week that I've had an opportunity to speak with who are going to be camping at Ohio State, or are going to be doing those private workouts. Some of them being in state, such as Isaiah Jones or Brian Parker. A couple of prospects in the 2022 class, and also 2023 as well. You talked about potentially getting offers at camps. Jaden Osbury is one who comes to mind, who's one of the top prospects in the nation. We have him at number 24 overall in the 2023 class. He doesn't have an offer yet from Ohio State, but we imagine that if he does attend that June 22nd camp, that he will get an offer. So we're definitely looking forward to that. It's going to be a big month full of offers. We saw Ohio State really kind of take things up a notch when it comes to 2023 recruiting, starting in December, mid-December, around that early signing period. That's when you saw a lot of offers go out. But wow, it's gonna go. It's going to get crazy in the month of June, and I think you're going to see a couple of 2022s get offers as well.
Yeah, and that's going to be the big question there. And and Dalton Moore, thank you for your question. We'll talk about Richard Young a little bit later in the show. I wanted to acknowledge your question now, but I'm going to take it off the board until we get to talking about that class. But as I jump through my banners, talking class of 2022, we know that this first weekend they're going to have almost the entire recruiting class there. It's going to be great for, not only for the chance for them all to meet in person for the first time as an entire group. I mean, we had a Buckeye Bash in 2021. Jack Sawyer was one of the ringleaders of that. 22, there was a hope to have a Buckeye Bash in conjunction with the spring game mid-April. Ohio wasn't exactly open yet at that point, so that didn't happen. So this is going to be it. We all want to talk about the commits. I mean, that's something that we all know about or whatever. But I think the more interesting story for me is just going to be some of the kids who are going to be in that first weekend, because they're certainly going to get the full court press with having, double-digit Ohio State commits already there.
Yeah, you have to imagine, with like Emile Wagner, who's close with CJ Hicks, that Hicks is really going to be in his here. Emile is an in-state 2022 offensive lineman. A lot of people are expecting him to wind up with the Buckeyes. Does he shut things down? Does he shut things down after that visit to Ohio State June 4th to the 6th, or does he end up taking his visits as well? You also have Amari aboard from Texas, big time Duncanville prospect. I really like Amari's game. We're going to kind of get into that when talking about 2022 defensive linemen, but he's really high on the Buckeyes. If you've been on his social media profile, he actually tweeted out about a week ago. There was a video of Coach Johnson teaching and Coach Larry Johnson teaching and showing off, techniques that work really well with pass rushers. And Amari quote tweeted it by putting the GOAT emojis. He really has high respect for Coach Johnson. I think it's going to be great that they'll get to meet together, in just over a week. And then also the big name, Xavier and Nwangpa, that's who everyone's going to be paying attention to. A lot of the commits, it's kind of been the running joke, right, Kevin, when we talk to the commits that, and Nwangpa is already a member of this class. He's that 13th member. He's already in the 2022 class. He just hasn't, committed just yet. And I'm really interested in seeing if he decides to wrap up his recruitment afterwards, because we've been hearing that he's going to extend it all the way out until January, which is the Under Armour All-America game. That's the decision that he's looking at. And he kind of confirmed it while speaking with Josh Helmholtz, saying that he's going to take 2 official visits throughout the season. So does Ohio State do enough to say, to make him say, you know what, I'm just going to shut things down. I'm going to join the class. This is where I want to be anyways. Or does he decide to wait things out a little bit longer? Zion Branch, another top 100 prospect as well, a safety target for Ohio State. It's interesting with those two, because I had heard from a source close to the situation that the Buckeyes were feeling really good about landing both of them, but the commitment of Kai Stokes earlier this month kind of threw a wrench into that plan to kind of mess things up in a way, in terms of being able to land both those prospects. And it seems like now it's either Branch or Nwangpa. Branch is said to be, committing soon. That's what we were hearing behind the scenes. Does he decide to do so? If he commits to USC, does that, or if he commits to Ohio State, what does that mean for Nwangpa? So there's just a lot of interesting storylines that first weekend of the month. And we haven't even talked about, like Toriano Pride, another cornerback target who the Buckeyes are still in pursuit of. How is he thinking about the Buckeyes with Ryan Turner recently committing 3 cornerbacks in the class? There's just a lot of interesting headlines to go along with most of the 2022 class being in attendance for that first weekend.
Right, exactly. And I was going to bring up Zion Branch, who's going to be in that first weekend. I'm going through the list of the uncommitted players that'll be there. Zach Rice, Nick James, George Fitzpatrick, Emile Wagner, Toriano Pride, Xavier, Omari Abor, and that seems to be it. But we always another name may show up or whatever. I want to deviate a little bit though, because we're talking about official visits, so this kind of dovetails in perfectly to it. We still have a 21 official visit coming up as well with JT Tuimoloau. I think that's about the best I'm ever going to pronounce it. If he commits to Ohio State, and I'm going to have to cover him for 3 to 5 years, I better get that one cold. But we're hearing, we've heard a reported date here in mid-June or whatnot, and I know we're kind of getting out of our chronological order, but this goes a long way to show that this is just not a month about 22s. I mean, we got all the 23 news, but we have 21 news as well. And JTT, on second reference and beyond, I'm going to just say JTT. I mean, he's got to come around and make a decision here pretty soon after he takes those visits, because I don't care how good you are, the season isn't going to wait for you.
Yeah, and what a perfect weekend for Ohio State to get JTT on campus. I'm glad that you said his last name first and that pressure wasn't put on me. But, you're going to have Kojo Antwi in town, Jake Pope as well, and Dallin Hayden for that June 18th to the 20th weekend, the reported date of his official visit. That's only 3 official visitors, and none of them being defensive linemen. So that's going to give Larry Johnson and the rest of the staff a lot of time to dedicate specifically to JTT. And the worst case scenario would have been him visiting the first weekend of the month or the last weekend of the month, where you have double-digit official visitors. Now you only get him on campus with 3 other prospects to worry about. That was kind of a perfect setup for the Buckeyes. It couldn't have gone any better. And then just looking at his recruitment in general, it's tough to really get a read on him. I've told our wonderful members of Buckeye Grove so many times that I've reached out to his mother, to his uncles, to everyone, to him, his coach, his trainer, everyone. He's just a tough person to get a hold of. He's kept his recruitment close to the vest. He doesn't reveal much on Twitter. Sometimes, I'll go through with my PhD and social media scrolling. I'll look through his likes. He doesn't like many posts. He doesn't retweet. He doesn't tweet that much. He's been very low key in his recruitment. Ohio State does appear to have the slight edge at this time, but you can't rule out Alabama as well. We're going to get into a question about him in terms of his connections with players at other schools too. But some of those schools in the Pac-12 that are on his list, you can't just brush off to the side as well. But I think Ohio State has to kind of like where things are at right now, and I think that June 18th to 20th official visit, they couldn't have gone any better for the program.
Yeah, and let's jump right into that question. I'm going to try and intersperse some questions. We got about, almost 20 questions from the membership over on Buckeye Grove in advance of this. I know sometimes doing these live chats mid-afternoon, people have work to do or whatnot, but yeah, I can't say for sure that we'd have 3 times the viewership if we did it in the evening. So the question is does JTT have a bond with any other recruit, even at another school? And certainly, like, everybody wants to say that there's some sort of, alliance with G. Scott Jr. because they're both from the Pacific Northwest. I mean, certainly G. Scott Sr. is a very large personality. He's a radio personality. He fantastic on social media. I mean, I love following his account, but I'm not going to say that JTT is somebody who doesn't, hang out with anybody, but he's done, at least in my findings, has really kind of kept his, his private dealings away from anything that we can ascertain at this point, unless, all of your conversations trying to reach out to aunts and uncles and coaches and everything has unearthed something else for you.
Yeah, so I did some social media, going through social media, looking at what I could find here. And, Sam Huard, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing his last name right, from who goes to Washington now, a big-time 2021 quarterback. He played on the same 7-on-7 team as JTT. Believe it was called FSP. So there's a connection there. And then obviously, Washington being the in-state school as well, he's probably got, friends or family members who have gone to the school. Julian Simon is the other big name that I unearthed. I also hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly as well. He's at USC. And, they've known each other for a while. They actually posted a really cool photo, Julian did, back in December, of them back as freshmen in high school, and then all the way to them becoming All-Americans. And that was pretty cool. So it shows that they've had a friendship over the past few years. They know each other. Julian, I've spoken with him before. He said that he recruits JTT, but they don't really talk about recruiting too much. With Alabama, could not find any connections there. No one really from the from the Pacific Northwest that goes to Alabama that he would know. But he did take a visit to Alabama in 2018. He camped out there, so there is some familiarity in terms of just knowing the campus before he officially gets on there. But yeah, JTT keeps it really close to the vest. As I said before, he doesn't reveal too much. I know his uncle was just looking at their social media profiles. One is a huge USC fan. The other said hashtag fight on and tweeted at JTT asking when a decision will be made. So, he has a couple of USC, family members who are fans of the program. But other than that, there's just not much to go off of in terms of answering that question besides Julian at USC and Sam at Washington.
Yeah, DL, who's keeping it all on the DL at this point. And, of all the schools out there, I think SC would be the one that would surprise me the most in terms of I know that from the Pacific Northwest that SC through the years has done a good job of, well, let me rephrase that, has done an adequate job of recruiting the Pacific Northwest. We're not seeing under Clay Helton or some of the, anybody since Pete Carroll, honestly, we've not seen the type of recruiting that we were used to for SC. So it's all well and good to sit there and have a guy or have a couple guys that you're tight with that are affiliated with the program or whatever. But at the end of the day, Sam Heward or whoever is not going to be the guy that's going to be you're going to learn under. He's not going to be coaching you or whatever. So I wouldn't go too far down the rabbit hole of saying that it's a matter of having 20 friends there, because if that were the case, nobody would ever go out of state or whatever. Yeah. I mean, at some point, that cycle has to start or stop or whatnot. So I mean, if that's the case, I guarantee you a lot of guys that end up around the Big Ten who are from Ohio. I mean, some of them Ohio State doesn't recruit. A couple do get away or whatever. But to me, I don't think it's a case of that they don't have any friends on the Ohio State roster. I mean, if anything, they've got 30 friends on the roster. So don't put too much into that.
Yeah, that's a really great point right there. I mean, at the end of the day, these recruits have to make the best decisions for them. It's not. We hear the cliche all the time. It's not a 4-year decision; it's a 40-year decision. So they're not only weighing the football side of things; they're weighing the academic side of things. Can I live in this city? Can I live on this campus? What is the environment? How does it feel like to me? Family. Will my family be able to see me on a consistent basis? Does that play into it? So there's so much that goes into it besides just who those personal connections. And we've seen it play. I mean, the Saul McCullough has connections at Ohio State, but he has family members at Indiana who are going to be going there or who are currently there. And sometimes it's just a matter of priorities, what matters the most. And unfortunately, we really haven't been able to get too much of a read on JTT just because he hasn't said too much to the media. He doesn't reveal too much on his social media profile. So it's hard to really dissect what are the priorities for him. But I wouldn't say that, him having a connection with Julian Simon at USC or Sam Howard at Washington or G. Scott Jr. and G. Scott Sr. at Ohio State, that's going to be what puts those schools over the top. I think there's just so many more factors that go into it besides those relationships.
I'm going to stick with some of the user-submitted questions just because that's what they want to know the answers to, and then we'll kind of jump back and forth into some of the upcoming weekends as well. Everybody wants to know, I mean, we've talked about before on our various shows, over-under on who might commit in June. People want to put our feet to the fire and pick names. I don't know if I'm ready to go with that. I mean, I have an idea of a couple people who I think could go in June, but as you get further into the month, you get a smaller window. So to somebody like Dallin Hayden, who's not coming the first week of June, I mean, what happens if he goes in July? He certainly doesn't go into that count. But if we're talking all classes, I think when we talked about just 22 in general, what did we say? Did we say 1.5 and then immediately regret that and wish that we made that number bigger? Do we, if we sit there and put 23 in there, where I think we could see the start of 23 coming together a little bit? I don't know. I'm feeling a little gambly. 4.5. I mean, is that where we're at? Do we count 2021? I mean, if JTT commits, does that go into the count? I don't think I need to put that into the equation to still ride at 4.5, but I think that's where I'm going to be at.
Yeah, I think 4.5 is a good number, and I would probably go with the under just because I don't like making those bold predictions because I don't want to be, like you said, held to the fire if we get our prediction wrong or whatever like that. People will say something and will be like, why didn't we get 5 or 6 commits? I think 4 is the number I've been on. I think Dallin Hayden is as close to a guarantee as you're going to get in terms of making those predictions. Another player you have to watch out for is Kayla Brown. We heard from a source in Columbus that he is a take for the program. He's going to be taking an official visit and an unofficial visit, June 7th. He scrapped the official visit June 25th through the 27th based on a recent conversation he had with our Michigan side. So he's another one I'm paying attention to. Curtis Neal is another one as well. He's got that connection. That North Carolina connection. He went to the same high school as Evan Pryor, so he could be one that ultimately ends up pulling the trigger. And then Emile Wagner, we talked about him earlier in the show as well. I could definitely see him joining the class shortly after that official visit to Ohio State. But you mentioned it before. Some of these may go into July as well. So in terms of just June tally, I'm going with 4 because I wouldn't be surprised if maybe Dallin decides I'm going to still take that Notre Dame official June 25th through the 27th. I'll make a decision a few days later. July 4th is a huge week, a huge holiday in terms of making commitments. You want to have those fireworks go off. So maybe some kids may decide to do it then just to make it an event. You mentioned 2023. We're going to be fielding a question about that as well. But, what if a Josh Padilla second visit and in 3 months he decides to, if he decides to wrap it up and commit to the in-state school? He obviously has a lot of love for the Buckeyes. He says that he wants to, bring out his decision all the way until next year before his senior season. But how many times have we heard that? And then a kid decides to commit. What if a prospect, the 2023 prospect, ends up getting a camp offer and it's, hey, we'll take you right away kind of deal, and they decide to. So there's so many factors at play. I'm gonna say 4 just because I don't want people flooding my direct messages if I get it wrong. But I think 4 is the number I'm going with right now.
Right, and you always have you mentioned Josh Padilla. I'll mention a couple of other in-state guys with offers. Luke Montgomery and Brandon Vernon. I mean, guys like that could get on campus and just be like, okay, why wait? I want to be that first guy. There's certainly a badge of honor of being the first guy to commit in a class. And, I think that it's a lot. An in-state guy who grew up watching Ohio State to be able to be there and be that guy and kind of the de facto ringleader. I mean, it's appealing. And I'm not saying, oh, well, just get ready to say Montgomery and Vernon are going to do it this next month. I don't know if they are. I absolutely am picking both of them to be Buckeyes when it's all said and done. I'll say the same thing about Padilla. Ohio State doesn't miss out on a lot of guys that it prioritizes. And if you go through and you look at 23 and you look at the in-state offers they've put out, it's, very limited. I mean, I think that coming out of June, you're going to see a couple more guys that have earned offers or whatever. But I've said it time and time again. Out-of-state offers a year in advance like that, you offered to be in the game. In-state offers, you have to be ready to accept that commitment right now. Let's say there's a kid that goes to Dublin Kaufman, and you jerk him around after you offer him. Kaufman's always going to have kids. And if you act kind of crummy in that situation, that's going to be remembered. That's not going to be a 1-year gaffe. That's going to be a 10-year gaffe.
Yes.
So you absolutely have to be ready at that point. And I think that there are a couple of kids that we want to see you. We want to have the opportunity to get to know you a little bit better. But I think those offers will be coming. But let's jump back as I look through my banners right here. We'll just go to this one. Let's go to the second weekend, which is the June 11th weekend, as I try to navigate between the questions we've been asked in the weekends. And, you got that weekend, one commitment coming in with Ryan Turner, but you look through the list and there are some dudes that are going to come in there. Curtis Neal, as you mentioned, Austin Jordan, who is down to a small list. Jalen Early, somebody that I honestly absolutely could see ending up in this Ohio State class. And then a couple of names that maybe we don't talk about as much for one reason or another. And then And then in conjunction with all that, you're going to have, a camp on the front end on the 8th and the 9th, and you'll have a camp on the back end 15th, 16th. That 6 to 7 day period could be as pivotal as anything.
That's huge. And just kind of kicking things off, you have Justice Haynes, big-time running back target out of Georgia, taking an unofficial visit June 7th. Trayon Webb, we spoke with him during our Southern Swing. He's going to be visiting June 8th and the 9th. Carnell Tate, who's out of IMG Academy, top 50 overall sophomore, is going to be taking an unofficial then as well. And Richard Young, who we had a question about, and we'll get to him later, he's taking a 3-day visit. June 9th to the 11th, I believe, or June 7th to the 9th, one of those time periods. But so it's going to get started off really well there. You're going to have some people camping as well, like Josh Padilla. He's going to be going on the 8th to that camp. Keith Sampson out of North Carolina as well. But then you get to the official visit weekend. That's the one people are going to be looking forward to, just because you have a couple of interesting names. I mentioned before that Toriano Pride is somewhat interesting just because of Ryan Turner's commitment. I feel the same way about Austin Jordan. He talked really well about Ohio State, talked good about them when we went into the Southern Swing trip in Texas a few weeks ago. He talked great about the program, but at the end of the day, Oklahoma was seen as the leader heading into our trip there. And, with Ryan Turner committing to Ohio State, does that just bump Ohio State down just a little bit, in terms of his recruitment? And Curtis Neal, he's absolutely someone I could see if they decide to give him the green light, which you would imagine they would based on their need for defensive linemen. Ohio State has no defensive linemen committed in this class right now. They absolutely need to get some players in the trenches. Only one player in the trenches total on both sides of the ball committed. So they absolutely need to get some momentum going there. I could see him committing shortly after his visit as well. And you mentioned those two guys that we probably don't really talk about too much, Joe Brunner and Gavin Sawchuk, both out-of-state prospects. Brunner's from Wisconsin. I have a hard time seeing him leaving the Badgers. And then Sawchuk seems to be an Oklahoma lean. And with Dallin Hayden potentially joining the class and Ohio State exploring some other running back options, it appears like they're seeing the writing on the wall there. But finally, wrapping things up with Jalen Early, you mentioned it, right off the top with, talking about this topic. I really do feel like, he's going to be the second offensive lineman or third offensive lineman, depending on when Wagner commits. I believe, I could definitely see Early ending up in this class. I mentioned it before. His mom is getting her master's in education at Texas Women's University. So education is an important part there. She's going to be accompanying Jalen during his visit to Ohio State, June 11th through the 13th. And absolutely, you can bet on it that Ohio State's going to emphasize academics and education to them and off the field opportunities. Early has a great relationship with the staff. He told me recently they've captured my attention. Wouldn't go as far as to say that they're his leader, but I really do like where the Buckeyes stand with him at this time. So that's going to be a pivotal, crucial set of days for the Buckeye staff, kind of starting on June 7th with Justice Haynes and then going all the way to the end of the weekend. But yeah, just a lot to look forward to. And then we also have Addison Nichols starting his visit June 14th, going to be taking a midweek official visit. And he has Ohio State in his top 5. He's going to be committing in July, so he's one to pay attention to as well.
Yeah, I'll jump in back on the Jalen Early here. There's a feeling of similarity to the recruitment of Baron Browning several years ago, where I believe Browning's mother was getting her PhD or something. Somebody that comes from a family very in tune with the academic side. And I'm not saying that Ohio State, wins 100% of those battles, but Ohio State certainly doesn't do a bad job of winning those types of battles. I can go through several kids Ohio State has lost to Stanford or whatnot, but it just has a bit of a same feeling there from the opportunity when I met Barron when he was still uncommitted, or he'd come off his Baylor commitment and he hadn't committed to Ohio State yet. What does that mean? Probably nothing. But let's get to Dalton Moore's question here about Richard Young. And we had the opportunity to see Richard during Southern Swing. And we saw him pretty much on the heels of seeing like Trayon Webb out of Jacksonville or whatever. But it really certainly felt to me that Richard had an affinity for Ohio State. Now, that doesn't certainly mean that Ohio State leads there, but dare I say that they certainly are in a very elite uppercut for him with a lot of time to go.
Yeah, I think you and I would agree that it's Alabama and Ohio State that it looks to be in the best position to land him. I know he showed up wearing a Florida Gators shirt during our interview, but I really do believe this one's ultimately going to come down to Ohio State and Alabama. And you mentioned it before. It doesn't mean that we believe Ohio State's his leader or anything like that. I think it's really close between those two programs. I think he's going to stretch out his recruitment somewhat to the very end. I could see this going all the way out into late 2022. So I wouldn't expect, any top schools list like top threes or top fives in the near future for him. But Ohio State is in a great position here. Tony Alford has done an excellent job of recruiting him, of recruiting his family members, staying in contact with his head coach at Lehigh Acres as well, James Chaney. So there's a lot going in Ohio State's favor there. They're going to be getting a 3-day visit, which is pretty much the equivalent of an official visit in terms of time that they're going to be on campus and being able to see Columbus. So that's huge. I really have, if you're a Buckeye fan, you really have to like where things stand with Young at this time.
I'm going to jump to another question out there about Landon Sampson. He's a wide receiver at South Lake Carroll, which obviously is the same school that's producing QB1 Quinn Ewers. He's going to have a chance to come check things out. Wide receiver is a difficult position to break through at for Ohio State because of just the way that Brian Hartline's recruiting has been going. You just look at class after class after class. Heard a lot of good things about Landon Sampson. Mm-hmm. I know the Ohio State offensive coaching staff likes Landon Sampson, but is that going to be enough to cross the finish line?
Yeah, this is really a difficult one to dissect too, because you have Kayla Brown visiting June 7th. Let's say he commits a few days later. He's taken back by the campus. He loves everything that he sees. He commits to Ohio State. Then they host Kojo Antwi on campus June 18th to the 20th, and they get a really good vibe from him. He's set to commit July 5th. And let's say Sampson decides to take his camp on June 22nd. Does Ohio State ultimately decide to extend him an offer if they're feeling really good about Kojo at that time? I don't want to disregard CJ Williams as well because he's obviously on the radar, but I don't see him in this class. But we believe that Ohio State's in the top 2 or top 3 with Kojo at this time. If they really get a good impression off of him coming off that June 18th to the 20th visit, and Sampson decides to camp the 22nd, even though they may like his skill set, do they decide to offer him and potentially risk not being able to get Kojo? Because if you extend an offer to Sampson, and looking at his offer sheet, Nebraska seems to be the school that's in the best position to land him, but you would imagine that he would jump on that Buckeye offer if he can, if he has the green light to commit. So that's a tough one to read. I really like his game. I like his speed. I like how he can go in one-on-one coverage, take the top off the defense. You have to have safety help over the top of him. And when you're the number 1 quarterback in the country's top wide receiver target and have been and put up monstrous numbers in your junior campaign, that speaks volumes of your of the type of player you are and type of competitor you are. So, yeah, this is going to be a tough one. I also mentioned Kevin Thomas before. He's going to be trying to do a private workout June 3rd or maybe a little bit later. What happens there? He's a guy who combines a lot of speed and a lot of size. So the wide receiver board is very interesting. They may end up taking 4, and it makes sense because, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson going to be in the NFL draft next year. You lost Jameson Williams and Mookie Cooper to the transfer portal. So they're going to be looking to take 4 in a class that we thought they could have potentially taken 2. So it's all a numbers game. What happens with Kayla Brown? What happens with Kojo Antwi? But I think Sampson is definitely deserving of an offer from the Buckeyes and deserving of offers from, bigger Power 5 schools. It just all depends on how the numbers will look like when he camps there.
And also just to add to the numbers as well, we're getting toward the end of the line with guys like Elijah Gardner and Jalen Harris as well. So certainly the opportunity there. And then, when you play roster management or whatever, maybe you bring in somebody as an athlete. And I know that there's on the football field, there's no such position as athlete. But sometimes if you try to squeeze one more player in, but it becomes a jigsaw puzzle because you have to make sure that with each subsequent commitment you get that you don't sit there and do anything to drive away earlier guys, so on and so forth. So there's a lot going on there in terms of trying to keep everybody happy. I certainly remember Ohio State trying to get Dontre Wilson in out of DeSoto, Texas, and convincing Dontre that he was a running back and convincing everybody else that he was an athlete. So, there is a little bit of that. I'm going to jump in on my buddy Mike Scarborough's question here. Joseph does not have a dog in this fight, not living in Ohio. Ohio has two fantastic premium ice cream brands, Grater's, which is out of Cincinnati, Jenny's, which is out of Columbus. Jenny's is much more bougie. They've got, rose water, crushed Eagle Beaks flavors, whereas Grater's has much more approachable flavors. The execution on Grater's is incredible. When you get something that says that it's going to have chocolate, it's got like chocolate the size of like a baby's fist in there. It's just not a bunch of little chocolate specks in there. On the other side, Jenny's, their flavors, when they put them together, are just amazing. I go back and forth on this one. I used to really be Team Jenny's, but I just think that they've gotten so bougie as of late that I think Grater's approachability gives them the nod. So that's where I'm at on that, what we would call an off-topic question. So I'm gonna jump back to one more that we've been asked in the chat, and I'm going back to Dalton here, who asked if Carnell Tate could be a realistic possibility for the first in 23.
Yeah, I don't know about Carnell Tate just because, I've spoken with someone in South Bend and, they really feel confident that Notre Dame's going to end up getting Carnell. But, I spoke with him roughly about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and he still has that offer, that Ohio State offer, as of when I last checked, pinned to the top of his Twitter profile. And he told me he wanted people to know that he's really interested in Ohio State. He likes what they do. He likes the opportunities on offense that they would present for him. And he thinks that he'd be able to fit in well, with the Buckeyes. And he's originally from the Midwest, I believe. So there are some connections there. Notre Dame, based off what I heard from my guy in South Bend, seems to be out in front for him at this time. So I don't know if I would say that he's a realistic possibility for the first 2023 commit. I really do believe that Josh Padilla is the one I'm kind of going with right now. He's just spoken so well of the Buckeyes. He checked out the spring game. He's going to be on campus in roughly a couple of weeks for the June 8th camp. So there's a lot to like there. And I think that he would be a really good guy to kind of kick things off, because think about it. This time last year, Ohio State already had 3 commits in their 2022 class. CJ Hicks, Jair Brown, and Tegra Shabola, all in-state guys. So I would go more with saying that an in-state product would be the first one to commit in 2023, and Padilla would be the one that I would go with right now.
I'm going to go back to the questions that we were asked by members over at Buckeye Grove. One of them is, how big will the 22 class be? And I've said time and time again, especially now as the portal is even more of a thing, is I'm not as concerned with how big the class is. It's all about staying at or under 85. Mm-hmm. Ohio State is at under 85 right now. So until I hear reasons otherwise, I'm always assuming every class is going to be somewhere between 23 and 25 guys, just because there are going to be the guys that are just going to up and leave. And I probably wasn't as surprised about the Mookie Cooper move. The Jamison Williams, I guess I really wasn't totally shocked there, but conversely, maybe a little bit more shocking. Max Ray leaving to end up going to Colorado. That one wasn't really shocking at all. He had a tremendous game against Michigan State when he was pressed into duty when the Ohio State offensive line depth was hammered by COVID and contact tracing. So unless, what are your thoughts on there? But, I as long as I'm going to keep doing this, 15 more years, 20 more years, unless they change the size of recruiting classes, that number is always going to be 23 to 25 to me until proven otherwise. Sure, they may throw a curveball and have an 18 in there, but with a lot more free movement for guys with the portal and the one-time transfer rule, I just can't see years to where you're going to be able to get away with 18, or that just everybody's going to stick.
Yeah, so I actually reached out to a source in Columbus to kind of figure out where they're looking at, what the size of the class may be. And I was told, quote unquote, it's very fluid. I can't put a number right now. So that's kind of where things are at. Ohio State's not going to limit themselves. They're not going to be like, hey, we're shooting for 23 or hey, we're shooting for 25. It's as it was described to me, a very fluid situation. I kind of mapped out what I believe would be kind of an ideal finish for the class, or realistically, I should say. I think at least four defensive linemen ending up in this class would be realistic. Additional wide receiver, maybe two, an additional running back, maybe two. Three more offensive linemen and two defensive backs, because they already have four defensive backs committed. I could see them adding another safety and another cornerback too. And at this point, it's really tough to say what the exact numbers would be like. It all depends on, hey, we're taking X amount of wide receivers. Where does that lead us to for in terms of numbers wise, where we can take defensive linemen or cornerbacks? Do we have enough space for an additional running back because we took two last cycle? There's just so many moving parts here, and we're halfway through the year. I wish we had less than halfway through the year, but wish we had a little bit more that we can give in terms of a solid number. I think as we approach October, November, we'll kind of get a more of a solid idea. But yeah, as it stands right now, it's just a very fluid situation.
Exactly. So I think hammering a number, I think 10 years ago, it was a lot safer to do that. You could sit there and count backwards from 85 and be like, okay, these are your 17 seniors. These are your three guys that are probably going to go pro early. Okay, you're sitting at 20. Throw one or two contingency places in there and say, okay, it's 22. But I just think that we've moved on too much from there. I'll hit Austin's question pretty quickly, and then we'll get back into our weekly progression. Recruitment and special teams, they're not going to get anybody right now. They just brought in Jesse Mirko, the Australian punter. They have Jake Seibert, who has been with the program for a year. They're fine there. You're not going to carry a pair and a spare at either of these positions. You're not going to carry 3 scholarship long snappers, anything along those of that nature. I mean, you still have Rowan McCullough. I still believe Bradley Robinson's still there. So there's not going to be a case of 22 being a year they need to do this. Maybe in 23, if you can go and get a guy who's like a top 2 or 3, either through the Coles system or the Sailor system, maybe you get somebody in there and you push them through. But there's such an immediate need and needing to keep that 85 as relevant as possible. You can't bring in Bryce Haynes the way that Jim Tressel did and then redshirt him and have a long snapper for 5 years. It just isn't going to work out that way. So I don't see anything in terms of 22 with any of that happening. But let's get back into our weekly look, and we're going to get into the weekend of the 21st, 18th. And we kind of talked about a couple of these guys, Dallin Hayden, Kojo Antwi, Jake Pope is coming in as well. That really kind of sums up your official visits. But once again, as I sit there and I bring up our other crawl, they've got camps on the 15th, 16th, and 22nd. So you're going to have some of those younger guys who are going to be coming in looking to get noticed as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And starting with the official visit weekend, you talked about Jake Pope there, and he's another interesting one just because of the fact that he had Kai Stokes' commitment. Where does Pope kind of fit into the mix? He told me recently that he's going to go in. He's still going to take his official visit. It doesn't matter to him that Stokes committed. He's somebody who's going to embrace the competition. I heard something similar from Kamari Ramsey, who's going to be taking his official visit just a couple of days later, starting a couple of days after those 3 wrap up their trips. But then you also mentioned Kojo Antwi. He's got Ohio State in his top 5. We're hearing that they could be as high as number 2 or in his top 3 at the very least, and that Alabama and Texas A&M are also in the mix. He's set to commit July 5th. What's going to happen with him? I think he's more likely to stay in this SEC at the next level. That's where I believe that he's going to end up going. Georgia doesn't seem to be as much of a threat as we initially thought, but Alabama is definitely a school to pay attention to, and Texas A&M just because of his Lone Star State ties. And then it feels like we talk about Dallin Hayden every single week, at this point, or almost every single day. It feels like this is going to be the trip that ends up wrapping up everything. You had a chance to speak with him as well back in March when he took a a self-guided tour to Ohio State, showed up wearing the Ezekiel Elliott number 15 jersey, did the O pose. He was really happy after that trip. He also took one to Notre Dame that he liked, but the Buckeyes seem to have the inside track here. And then JTT, who we talked about a lot, we don't need to really go much further into that, into his recruitment as we talked about him before. But yeah, those official visit dates are going to be huge for the Buckeyes, just because you're going to get a lot more time to spend with each of these prospects since there's only going to be 3 on campus. Now, looking at kind of before and after, you have AJ Harris, who's going to be taking a 2-day unofficial visit starting on June 16th. He's a top 30 cornerback in the country, and he's from the state of Alabama, but he's been high on the Buckeyes. I believe he still has his offer from March pinned to the top of his Twitter profile as well. Really high on the program. Ty Lockwood is also going to be visiting during that June 18th to the 20th weekend. He's a Rivals 100 tight end. And then following that official visit weekend, you're going to see some Sunshine State products and Malik Bryant, who's a number 18 overall 2023 prospect in the country, and Peyton Kirkland, a big-time offensive lineman out of Orlando. They're going to be taking 2-day trips starting on June 22nd. So, a lot of the attention, once again, is going to be going on those official visits, but in between them, there's going to be a lot of these 2023 recruits, big-time prospects showing up on campus as well.
We had the opportunity to talk to Peyton Kirkland on Southern Swing, and we just lost Joseph. He's been having some there he is, some laggy issues. His roommate must be playing PS5 right now or something. But we had a chance to talk to Peyton Kirkland during Southern Swing. He was wearing a University of Cincinnati shirt that day, but he's certainly somebody that I think that very easily could end up in the Ohio State class. Has ties to the Buckeye State. Maybe not as much, 100% to Ohio State, but he's got some Ohio State, he's got some Michigan State ties or whatnot. So somebody worth keeping an eye on there too. I think it might be a little. Just figuring out what that was. Might be a little early for him to be making a move, but I think he's somebody that Ohio State fans should keep an eye on, because I think there could be something there. And then somebody else that I know that Joseph had mentioned earlier that we saw on the same day is TJ Shanahan as well. I know that there's a future cast that's been put in for him as of like a month ago. Maybe a little premature on that for my liking, but if we are just picking based on who we think is going to end up in the class, I could buy that one.
Yeah, for sure. And we heard that during our Southern Swing trip that there is some legitimacy to that future cast, that wasn't something that our great Texas Louisiana analyst Sam Spiegelman, he didn't just submit it for the heck of it or to get Ohio State fans riled up. There's definitely some legitimacy to it. I'm not ready to go that far. I definitely believe Shanahan has to get on campus first. I know Florida is a big school for him and his family too, so, and with him being only less than a couple hours from UF's campus, they're a program always to watch, but I'm definitely not ready to put the future cast in until he makes that trip up. But the Buckeyes, I would say, comfortably are in his top 3, in his unofficial top 3, although he appears to be really early on in his recruitment. So another player I didn't mention as well who will be camping is Jaden Osbury. I mentioned him earlier in the show, but he's going to be at that June 22nd camp as well. Isaiah Jones. He's an in-state linebacker. He's going to be taking a private workout, I believe, on June 16th. I mentioned Caleb Johnson as well, in-state running back out of Hamilton. He's going to be going to a camp on June 15th as well, I believe. So there's some other interesting 2022s and 2023 in Osbury who are going to be showing up as well. To those camps, to taking those private workouts. There's just a lot going on. I think every single day of the month. Maybe besides a couple of days, they're going to have prospects on campus. So, yeah, it's going to be a lot. Stay tuned for a lot of coverage in that respect.
We'll hit the last weekend here in a minute, but let's jump back to some more questions. I go to Buckeye Grove and ask for questions, and I think we've only hit about 4 of them. So this one was part of our first dump of questions. Do you agree with Ryan Day's quarterback recruiting strategy of going for the best each year and then possibly seeing high turnover each year at the position minus the starter? And, Ohio State certainly already is set up for 22 with QB1 Quinn Ewers. I'll probably call him QB1 for the rest of the time I know him, just because I had a chance to spend some time with CJ Hicks and Gabe Powers, and they just joked about how it's QB1, QB1, QB1. Personally, I think you do that and you sort it out, because there are no guarantees that even if you brought in some, I don't know, I hate judging kids like this, but we are in a ranking service, so you have to. But if you bring in some mid-tier kids, you still could lose kids along the way. So if there's going to be a constant churn, why not churn through the best? I don't think it's a case of where you're like, well, if we bring in a couple of program players or whatever, that may not work either. And I think that it really only takes getting out of turn once or twice to completely have your quarterback room fall apart.
Yeah, it would be just a bunch of word salad for me to add anything more to what you just said. But yeah, I completely agree with everything you mentioned. And this kind of was spawned off of, I believe it was really based off of Malachi Nelson. He's the only 2023 quarterback that they've offered thus far, and he just so happens to be the number one overall quarterback in the country. And at this point, like you said, you just got to go for the best and just hope that you continue to churn out those top prospects. They've landed top 3 quarterbacks in each of the past 3 cycles. So, there's a lot going in Ohio State's favor. And at this point, what top quarterback in the country wouldn't want to play for the Buckeyes, just considering the arsenal, the weapons that they have on the outside and in the running back room as well. The offensive line definitely needs some improvement in terms of recruiting efforts there, but there's a lot to like if you're a quarterback in a pass-friendly offense. So just continue going after the best, and if you miss out on the Malachi Nelson, that's fine. You still got Quinn Ewers there, and I think most would assume that whether it's next year or the year after, Quinn's going to be holding down that starting job for until he heads to the NFL. So I'm definitely in the mindset of what Day and Dennis are doing. Corey Dennis, who's done a great job, since he's been with Ohio State. Just continue going after the best, and even if there is a high turnover rate.
Right. You don't shy away from going after Malachi Nelson. You don't shy away from going after Arch Manning. I mean, and there are the reports that Arch Manning may make a visit to Ohio State or whatnot. Yeah. Arch Manning needs to go to Ole Miss. I mean, they're just too good of a story. He needs to go to Ole Miss, but stranger things have happened along the way. But Ohio State will keep recruiting those top quarterbacks. Ohio State will continue being a quarterback destination. I did a story about 1-2 punches at wide receiver based on either yardage, receptions, or touchdowns. And I went back to the 91 season where Kent Graham and Kirk Herbstreit combined for 5 passing touchdowns over the course of the season. Ohio State's leading receiver had 2. So we've come a long way, baby, since then. Let me try and pull one more of these before we go into the last weekend. Just talked about name, image, likeness on a different show, so I'll stay away from that. Does Jair Brown stay in the class? And I don't know if anybody has. I seem to think he does, but you just don't know. I also probably was a little late to the Deshaun McCullough going to Indiana party. I mean, because when Dad took the job at IU, he's like, "Oh, I'm just looking forward to beating Dad's butt or whatever." When the one brother went to IU, didn't really seem to move the needle. When his younger brother Day got committed there, but then when the other brother Deland, am I right? When Deland committed to Indiana, that seemed to be kind of all right. That's just too much weight there to look past or whatnot. So, I know that Jair certainly has not always 100% on social media. Seemed to have locked away everything else. I mean, I just got an offer from so-and-so or whatnot. I think a lot of people see that as indecision or whatnot. Jair's had to deal with a lot of grown man things in his life. There's been a lot of stuff going on. Not my business to get into all of that. Just had to deal with some tragedies. I want to cut the kid some slack or whatnot. But, I think he sticks. But, it's Cruton, baby. It's Cruton. You never know.
Yeah, you mentioned it there with some of the things that Jair has gone through, and that's why I've stayed away from messaging him about his recruitment. I haven't said anything. I've just reached out and said, I'm here in case you ever need someone to talk to at this point, because it's bigger than football with some of the things that he's gone through. But in terms of his recruitment, I did reach out to a member of Ohio State's 2022 class. pretty much, he told me not going anywhere. Feels really confident that Jair is going to stay. I reached out to, one of my sources in South Bend as well. Is familiar with Notre Dame's program. They said, at this point, he's a wild card. Who knows what's going to happen? And I bring up Notre Dame just because they're viewed as the school that if Jair was to flip anywhere right now today, it would be Notre Dame. But I heard that he's a wild card. Don't know what's going to go on. There's a lot of things that he's going through right now. So recruiting isn't really the primary focus for him, obviously. So, I'm going to go off what I heard from, the 2022 class that he's going to stay. I think it is likely that he does. He moved back to Ohio just to be, pretty much closer and, make that transition that much more smooth. So I'm going to go with Jair staying in this class as of today, but who knows? Does he decide to take an official visit to Notre Dame? Does he decide to explore more of his options? That still remains to be seen. And I think we'll be able to answer this question a little bit better after he takes that official visit to Ohio State in early June.
And I'll jump in on just another one that people have tried to say is not 100% locked in, and that's Tegra Shabola, who we saw at the Rivals camp in Indianapolis. It was learned during the time of that camp that he had plans to take an official to Kentucky. Had to backpedal on that a little bit, says that he's 100% locked in. Does that mean that he couldn't end up showing up on campus in Lexington to check things out? No. So again, it's a situation of Ohio State is not immune to the same thing that everybody else is. Ohio State fans always cheer when Ohio State comes in and flips a kid. When somebody comes in and tries to flip an Ohio State kid, those dirty scoundrels, how dare you? That shouldn't be allowed or whatever. But, I think that there certainly are people around the Kentucky program. I'm sure Vince Marrow thinks that he can flip them. I also think that when it comes to Kentucky recruiting, they probably end up with 50 commitments over the course of the year, and 23 of them, 25 of them stick. I mean, it's just kind of a clearinghouse there because guys that come in, guys come out. But, I would be remiss not to bring up Tegra as we talk about Jair, just because, again, it just goes to show it's the recruiting process, and you are going to have a little bit of that movement sometimes. And sometimes it's just flirtation. Sometimes it leads to full-on flip. But, I think both of those are probably more in the flirtation category.
Yeah, I think it definitely is a little bit concerning with Tegra's case that the staff didn't know about it. Like he said it during the interview with Dave Blackford, who was talking about the Kentucky official visit. He said, okay, when David asked if Ohio State staff knew, he pretty much said that, no, I haven't told them yet. And then we had that confirmed as well, through the back channels that the staff didn't know about that official visit being set up. That is definitely a little bit concerning because even though he said, I'm not taking an official visit to Kentucky, he said that on Twitter, as you mentioned, he said, I'm 100% committed to the Buckeyes. The fact that he didn't tell the staff about that, you have to wonder what communication is like. And I know when you spoke with him that he said, contact is still going good. He's still talking with Coach Stud and still talking about the members of the staff. But that was the part that, is a little bit troublesome if you're the Buckeyes and if you're Buckeye fans in terms of whether or not Tegra stays in this class or not. I still lean toward saying that he will, but you have to give Kentucky its props. They've done well. They landed Jogger Burton, although in the COVID world where he wasn't able to take visits would that have been the case. But, they got Keontae Goodwin as well, committed in this 2022 class. That was a huge win over the Buckeyes, Alabama, Clemson, other schools there in the mix. So, you can't necessarily rule them out for 4-star offensive linemen anymore, and Tegra being one of them since he recently started up contact with the staff. And one of his good friends, Alex Safari, recently committed to Kentucky. He's a 2022 DB. So I wouldn't completely rule out Kentucky, but I would say what you said, that him and Jair are kind of in that flirtation kind of stage of, with their commitment with Ohio State.
We'll jump in and talk the final weekend, and maybe we'll take one more 2 questions at the end, and we'll be a little bit beyond our hour. So let's go to the weekend of the 25th. One Ohio State commitment with Jaheem Singletary. The reason Singletary isn't going earlier is he had he already had plans for the big weekend on the front end, so he'll come in that weekend. A lot of big names coming in this weekend. Kayla Cam Dewberry, somebody who grew up as an Ohio State fan, but you know how that goes sometimes. Once it's a little tough to go far away once you get to that point and whatnot. You got the pair of kids out of Cedar Grove High School outside of Atlanta with Joshua White and Kristen Miller. You've got Kenyatta Jackson, who's the teammate of Ryan Turner. You've obviously got Eni White, who's somebody worth keeping an eye on. Jaden Bellamy. You got Amarian Hampton, running back out of North Carolina. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. This weekend of the 25th, in terms of just numbers, is the second biggest by just numbers of kids that are supposed to be in.
And it's the biggest weekend in terms of targets, because you mentioned that Jaheem Singletary will be on campus, but he's going to be the only commit there. It's a big weekend in terms of defensive linemen coming in. You rattled off the names. We'll just start it off with Chris McClellan out of Oklahoma. He's a name that, I've been paying attention to since he got offered earlier this spring. He's really high on the Buckeyes, really high on Coach Johnson, so keep an eye on him. You mentioned the Cedar Grove teammates, the pair of Kristen Miller and Joshua White. That gets really interesting because White was somebody we heard wasn't really in contact with the staff that much earlier this year. It had kind of fallen off a little bit, but we got to see them in person. They have Miller and White. They have a really good friendship. They're really close with one another. If being able to give White the green light helps facilitate getting Kristen Miller into this class, is that an option that Ohio State explores? I think it's definitely something that they should. You mentioned Eni White. I heard a few weeks ago that Ohio State is really high on his board. I expect them to – I think they're in the top 3 right now. I think they're legitimate contenders for his services. And also it helps if he decides to make a July commitment, that not only did he visit Ohio State roughly a week or two before he makes that decision, but also that Clemson doesn't allow official visits. And Clemson is a school that's high on his radar too. So, that's big that Ohio State gets the last visit for him of the month. Jaden Bellamy, he's another cornerback. He told me that Ryan Turner's commitment does not impact him at all, so he's still set to take this visit. And then let's get over to Kenyatta Jackson, too. You mentioned he's teammates with Ryan Turner. He actually quote tweeted Turner's commitment, I believe, and said future teammates ? With the eye emojis. So he's somebody that's considering the Buckeyes. He has them in his unofficial top 4. Amarian Hampton. Right now, it would appear that he would be the second running back in this class, after Dallin Hayden, because we're already saying that he's a shoo-in. But, Hampton's somebody who doesn't talk too much. I had that confirmed through back channels, too, that even with Ohio State staff, he's just not someone who really likes to talk a lot. Once again, keeps things close to the vest. But it's a huge weekend. And I didn't even get to mention Dewberry. And the reason for that is just because I think he stays in the South at the next level, whether it's in the state of Texas at A&M or with the Longhorns or Alabama. I don't see him getting much north of that when he gets to college. Even though he's spoken well of the Buckeyes and talks great about them, we've heard that story before. You mentioned about the dream school and this is my favorite school growing up. If I had to go to one school, I'll go here, and then they go to another school. So I guess that's a positive for the Buckeyes, but I don't see him ending up in this class. Either way, it's a huge weekend. At least they get one commit on campus, even though Singletary is admittedly not the biggest recruiter out of everyone. He told us that when we saw him. He doesn't really get into that much, but it's going to be good to have one commit on there to pushing some of these guys to commit. And who knows? I'm not really expecting any out of this bunch to commit shortly after, but we'll see what happens with Miller and White. Those are the 2 I'm really paying attention to.
And don't believe for a second that C.J. Hicks and Gabe Powers and some of these guys are not going to be hanging out on campus. They don't have to be on an official visit. I mean, they can unofficial visit and still be around for pizza and all of that good stuff. I mean, we know that Quinn Ewers is supposed to be coming out to campus for an official and an unofficial all within the month of June. There's certainly going to be the potential of a lot of stuff like that going on. So it's not like Ohio State is going to be devoid of its student recruiters or its recruiters. They're going to have that opportunity there. I want to jump in, and there are 2 questions I kind of singled out, and then we'll call it a show after that. We had 3 people submit questions, and I haven't touched upon one person's question, so I don't want to do that. And the way the question he asked, and I'm gonna change it a little bit. He says, "Love to know how you rank the coaches as recruiters." I'm going to change it to, who do you think the top 3 recruiters on the staff are? And for me, and I haven't even really given this a lot of thought because I wanted this to be really organic. I wanted it to come out without, being rehearsed. Heartline, I think Larry Johnson. I mean, as much of Larry Johnson there is going to be based on the name of Larry Johnson. And then Tony Alford. Tony Alford does work. Tony Alford, people are like, well, he's just got such a small window of being a running back recruiting coach. No. He recruits Florida. He recruits the state of Florida. I mean, regardless of position, I had so many kids sit there and say, oh, I'm talking to Coach Alford all the time. I'm talking to Coach Alford all the time. And, that's an opportunity for, I'm going to take single camera here for a second, for, it's a big deal for him to be able to get out there, get in front of all these kids and whatnot. So when, you look at the coaches, I mean, obviously with what they've done at wide receiver, it's hard to take away from what Brian Hartline's done, to be able to get top kid after top kid after top kid after top kid, so on and so forth. Larry Johnson, during the interviews that Joseph was conducting during Southern Swing, I mean, so many kids were saying, GOAT status, greatest of all time, for those of you who don't understand the lexicon, just legend, things along those lines. And then obviously with what I've said about Alford, and that's not taking away anything from Carrie Combs, who was a fantastic recruiter first time around. It's certainly there now. I mean, I think that we can sit there and pick high points and low points really kind of on everybody. But, I'm going to kind of focus on the positive and just pick a top 3, because at that, nobody wants to get to the point of where you're getting then, oh, and this guy, well, he's around. I mean, that would make my job infinitely more difficult if that got back to that coach that I really didn't think much of his recruiting prowess.
Yes, I completely agree with you. And it's kind of tough because, I listed out a few names. Like, you have to look at Corey Dennis as one of them too. He's not going to make my top 3 right now, but he's doing an excellent job on the trail, and he's doing a pretty good job in the state of Texas specifically. So hello to you as well, Brian. So yeah, definitely pay attention to Corey in the coming years. I think, this time next year, he could be somebody who's in that top 3. But Brian Hartline, absolutely. He's killing it on the trail. One thing that he does a really good job of is forming relationships with not only the recruits, but their parents as well. And we heard that multiple times with some of the kids that we got to speak with. And his reputation speaks for itself. He's somebody who played in the NFL. That carries a lot of credibility with these players as well. So I would probably put him just at the top in terms of just the role that he's on and what he's been able to do on the trail. He's been excellent. I actually had Carrie Combs in my top 3 as well. And just because of him being in the NFL, that carries a lot of weight. Coaching in the NFL, coaching with the tight ends, that's something that numerous defensive backs I've spoken with have brought up. He does a really good job of recruiting. He's an ace recruiter. And, I actually heard something really interesting. I can't say the name of the recruit, but, he kind of made waves with a big time target, in the past few weeks in the 2022 class. So, if Combs can pull that one off, that he'd probably elevate to number 1. But Alford is another coach that, wow, when we took that Southern Swing trip and did Georgia, Florida, specifically Florida, his name was everywhere. It was, being described as a father figure, somebody who, like Hartline, makes it a point to stay in touch with the parents as well. And that means a lot to the recruits. And, not only running backs, but players at other positions too. He really values recruiting. He's really invested in it. He's really invested in the relationships that go into it, not only with the parents, the recruits, but also the coaches. We talked with Kai Stokes' head coach, Evan Davis, at Armwood, and they've been in touch with one another for over a decade. And that's ultimately helped to facilitate Stokes' commitment to the Buckeyes. Alfred, hearing from Davis, and then Alfred pounding the table for Stokes, and all of that jazz over the past few weeks. He's just somebody that we actually heard from one coach that he's someone who can lead a program. He's somebody in the future who could lead his own program. And we had a question that was asked on Buckeye Grove about that, which Buckeye coach could you see being a head coach? And Alford would be my pick, just based off everything that I've heard. So those would be my top three: Alford, Hartline, and Combs. But there's so, like you mentioned, Johnson. His resume speaks for itself. It carries a lot of weight. I just don't think that necessarily he's the active recruiter in terms of hitting all of these kids all the time like Alford is. He's kind of a little bit more old school in that respect. But yeah, I would definitely say Hartline, Alford, and Combs for this response.
And I'll throw one more name out there, somebody who's not quite there yet, but I think he's going to get there, and that's going to be Matt Barnes. I think Matt Barnes certainly can be that guy. Last question. And it's going to force me to bring out my pronunciation book. Seems things have cooled with Palaie Naoteote. Is he still in the mix? And either way, do you see us landing any other transfer portal guys before the 21 season? I don't necessarily – I mean, I know that there's been talk from people who want to sit there and see them at a corner. Not a ton in the corner right now. I know that there's the former Clemson player who had some legal issues. That might be seeming to clear up, but I think that he might end up at UGA. So when we get to EA, I don't think the fact that we're not hearing anything means anything at this point. It's not like we're in the Maymester. It's not like he can sit there and suddenly enroll right now and be going at this point. It's just going to take its time. I still think that it's going to work out. I still think that he will end up signing with Ohio State. I still kind of see him being in that fourth linebacker role, kind of as like a Justin Hilliard. And that doesn't mean that even necessarily he might be the fourth guy, but I kind of see a sharing of the duties type of situation, very different than what it would have been with Henry Toto, who you put out there and you just let him run around and do Henry Toto type of things. But EA, I still think ends up at Ohio State. I haven't heard anything to really dissuade me at this point, but honestly, I haven't really heard anything in about the course of a week on this one. So, don't use the lack of news as saying that bad news because I'm not hearing anything. No, it's bad news when you hear that he has signed somewhere else.
Yeah, same here. I agree with you. And the transfer portal has been an interesting topic for the Buckeyes over the past few months because it seems to have hurt them more than it has helped them, at least this go around. There were some guys that you were potentially thinking that Ohio State was going to be able to land. The biggest name that comes to mind is Elias Ricks from LSU. What was going to be his situation? And then you mentioned Henry Toto, and then he ultimately ended up going to Alabama. I don't know if Ohio State lands anybody else outside of we'll just call him PG because that'll be my nickname for him.
Yeah.
But we'll just say PG at this point. I don't know if they land anyone outside of PG. Like you mentioned before, just because there's been no news doesn't mean that it's bad news or good news. It could just be that things are continuing to progress. Ohio State could definitely use a linebacker, even though he has had an injury history, and even when he's been on the field, he hasn't been as productive. I think he's averaging less than 8 tackles per game. He hasn't been as productive as like a Henry Toto has been throughout his short career, but he's probably the only one I could see end up transferring to Ohio State if they get someone out of the portal this time around. But yeah, I think it's going to ultimately end up with them just losing more than they gained. They're not going to get a Justin Fields or a Trey Sermon. It's not going to be one of those go-arounds, but it brings up an interesting topic. We talked about it before in one of our staff roundtables about whether the portal is a net positive or a net negative. I think you and I, we both agree that it is a positive for the Buckeyes, but yeah, you're going to see some of those tough losses like with a Jamison Williams every now and then just because of it.
Right. Dan, that sounds good. Riding your mountain bike around, making you happy. I hit the gym again for the second time this week. Can't you tell? I'm not very happy right now. I'm in a significant amount of pain. It's going to be worse tomorrow, so I've been a little slow changing the banners or whatnot, but I certainly try to jump in and hit all of the questions that we get here or comments when we do our live product. As you see down there, if you really enjoy the live chats, let us know at OSU at Rivals on Twitter. We love doing these. I like doing the other podcasts too, but I think this is something we could do weekly come June. just to kind of do a recap or something like that. But we are here for you. Are you a member of Buckeye Grove? Let us know on Buckeye Grove. Are you not a member of Buckeye Grove? Why the hell not? Join Buckeye Grove. This is the time to be there. All the news that's going on. So just let us know. I mean, let us know what you like, and we will try to tailor everything we can. The only thing we can't do is promise you commits are going to happen. We're not part of that process, but we're here to tell you the full story. But, I think we're here at about an hour 15, which is a little longer than I thought we were going to go. Joseph, any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
No, I just would like to thank everyone for tuning in, for asking questions in the live chat, and then also asking questions beforehand too. And yeah, thank you all, and go ahead and sign up for your Buckeye Grove account and read some of our great pieces that we've been rolling out. It's going to be a great time to sign up, just with a big weekend, coming up in June 4th to the 6th, and just the whole month of June in general. So be sure to join aboard, sign up, and let us know, about, like Kevin said, as you can see in the banner right here. I think I got my finger on it. If you enjoyed the live chat and what your thoughts were. So greatly appreciate you all tuning in.
Absolutely. I could have said it better myself. So for Joseph, I'm Kevin. Thanks for being part of the show. Sounds like we might be joining you again next week, and we will just re-rack it and do this all over again. But until then, have a great day. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the long weekend. June is almost here.